I shouldn't have taken Highway 17 that night. Everyone in town said the same thing afterward, like it should have been obvious. But when you're tired, trying to make it home after a 14-hour shift, and the GPS tells you one route will save nearly an hour, you don't think much about local rumors. You just drive. That's how it started. A quiet highway, an empty road, and a drive that never seemed to end. It was a little after midnight when I left the hospital parking lot. I worked as a radiology technician in a city about 2 hours away from where I lived. Usually I stayed overnight with a coworker when shifts ran late, but that night I just wanted my own bed. My phone battery was low. My brain was foggy. The GPS suggested a shortcut I'd never taken before. Highway 17. It cuts straight through a stretch of forest and farmland instead of looping around the mountains like the main highway did. 40 minutes faster. That sounded perfect. I tapped start route and began the drive. At first everything felt normal. Streetlights, gas stations, late night traffic. But after about 20 minutes, the city lights faded behind me. The road narrowed. Trees crowded close to both sides, and the GPS announced calmly, "Continue on Highway 17 for 72 miles. 72 miles of empty road." I shrugged and kept driving. 10 minutes later, I realized something strange. I hadn't passed a single car. No headlights coming the other way. No tail lights ahead of me. Nothing. The road stretched into darkness in both directions. Even the houses had disappeared. Just trees. Tall black silhouettes pressing close to the pavement. I turned on the radio. Static. Every station crackled like the signal had died. That's when my phone lost service. One bar, then none. I sighed and kept driving. It was a straight road. There was nothing complicated about it. Just keep going until the GPS said turn. The first unsettling thing happened around 12:50 a.m. I noticed a figure standing on the side of the road. At first I thought it was a deer, but as my headlights approached, the shape became clearer. A person, standing perfectly still, right at the edge of the asphalt. My stomach tightened. It looked like a man, tall, wearing dark clothes. But the strange part was the way he stood. He wasn't facing the road. He was facing the woods, completely turned away from passing cars. As I drove past him, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man hadn't moved. He was still staring into the trees. I told myself he was probably just someone who had broken down nearby. Maybe he'd gone into the woods for some reason. Still, the sight left a weird feeling in my chest. But the road stayed empty, and eventually the forest swallowed him behind me. 20 minutes later, I saw another one. Another man standing on the roadside, facing the woods. The exact same posture. Arms hanging loosely at his sides. Head tilted slightly upward. He didn't turn as I drove by. Didn't react to the car at all. Just stood there, watching the trees. A chill crept down my spine. Two people doing the exact same thing miles apart? That was odd. But coincidences happen. That's what I told myself. I kept driving. The third one was where things stopped feeling normal. He was standing in the middle of the road. My headlights illuminated him suddenly as I rounded a bend. I slammed the brakes. The tires screeched across the pavement. The car stopped just a few feet from him. For a moment, neither of us moved. He stood there with his back to me, looking into the woods on the opposite side of the road, just like the others. I rolled down my window. "Hey!" I shouted. "Are you okay?" No response. He didn't even react. Didn't turn his head. Didn't move a muscle. "Hey!" I called again. Still nothing. The man remained perfectly still, like a statue. After a few seconds, I carefully steered around him and continued down the road. My heart was beating faster now. Something about it felt wrong, deeply wrong. Then I saw headlights behind me. I nearly cried with relief. Another car. Finally, the headlights grew closer in my mirror. Whoever was driving was going much faster than me. Good. Maybe I could follow them out of this weird stretch of road. But something strange happened. The car behind me didn't pass. It stayed exactly the same distance back, maybe 50 yards, for miles. No matter how fast I drove, or how slow, the distance stayed the same. Eventually, I turned slightly in my seat to look through the rear window. The headlights were bright, but I couldn't see the vehicle behind them. Just light, floating in the darkness. That's when the radio suddenly turned on by itself. A burst of static filled the car. Then a voice cut through the noise. A calm male voice. "Driver on Highway 17. I stared at the radio. The voice continued. "If you are alone in your vehicle, do not stop your car." My stomach dropped. "This road is currently under investigation," the voice said. "Multiple disappearances have been reported along this route." The static crackled. "Do not interact with any pedestrians you see along the roadside." I thought about the men standing in the woods. My hands tightened on the wheel. "Do not exit your vehicle." The voice paused, then spoke again. "If you notice anyone standing in the road, do not stop." My chest tightened. "You must keep driving." The radio went silent, then shut off. I tried to speed up, but the car behind me stayed the same distance away. The headlights never changed, never got closer, never fell back, just hovering there in the mirror, watching. Then the GPS screen flickered, and the route updated. "Continue on Highway 17 for 113 miles. My heart skipped. That wasn't right. I had already driven nearly an hour. The distance should have been going down, not up. That's when I saw the next group. Not one person, not two. At least a dozen figures standing along the roadside, all facing the woods, all perfectly still. My headlights swept across them as I passed, and for the first time, one of them moved. His head turned slowly, not toward the road, toward my car. Even though his body stayed facing the trees, his neck twisted too far, farther than a human neck should. His face appeared in my side window for a split second, and he was smiling. Panic surged through me. I pushed the accelerator harder. The engine roared. The speedometer climbed past 80, then 90. Still, the headlights behind me remained exactly 50 yards back. I glanced at the GPS again. Continue on Highway 17 for 127 miles. The number kept increasing, like the road was stretching, endlessly. Then I saw the sign, a rusty roadside sign illuminated by my headlights. Welcome to Highway 17. I frowned. That made no sense. I had been driving on Highway 17 for over an hour. Why would there be a welcome sign now? But beneath it, there was another sign, smaller, almost hidden by weeds. It read, "You should not have stopped." My stomach twisted. I remembered the man standing in the road, how I had slammed the brakes, how the car had come to a complete stop, just for a moment, but still, I had stopped. The road ahead curved sharply. As I turned the wheel, my headlights swept across something that made my breath catch. Hundreds of figures, standing in the forest, just beyond the trees, all facing the road now, watching. Their pale faces glowed in the headlights, and slowly, one by one, they began stepping out of the woods, toward the asphalt. The radio crackled again. The same voice returned, but this time it sounded strained, panicked. "If you stopped your vehicle at any time..." Static swallowed the signal. Then the voice came back. "They will follow you." My heart pounded. "They only move when you stop." The headlights behind me suddenly flickered, then went out. The voice on the radio whispered one final sentence. "You should never stop on Highway 17. Then the engine of my car died. The headlights shut off, and in the darkness surrounding me, I heard hundreds of footsteps, moving closer. Story 2. I started the drive at 11:10 p.m. It wasn't supposed to be a long trip, just 3 hours down Highway 64 to reach my sister's place. She had called earlier that evening, her voice tight and worried, saying she needed help with something at the house. She wouldn't explain what. "Just come tonight," she said. "Please." So I grabbed my keys and left. At the time, it felt like a normal drive. Quiet road, cold air, dark sky. But somewhere after mile marker 42, the highway stopped behaving like a road and started behaving like something else. The first hour passed without anything strange. The highway stretched straight through farmland and patches of forest. The occasional gas station glowed in the distance, and every few minutes another car would pass going the opposite direction. I kept the radio low and the heater running. Around midnight, traffic faded. The farmland disappeared, replaced by thick woods on both sides of the road. Tall trees pressed close to the asphalt, their branches tangled together above like a tunnel. The GPS estimated 2 hours remaining. I relaxed slightly and kept driving. Then I noticed something odd. The mile marker signs were counting backward. I first saw mile 47. 5 minutes later, I passed mile 45. Then mile 44. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe this section of highway was measured from the opposite direction. But when I passed mile 42, something felt wrong. Because 5 minutes later, I passed mile 42 again. I slowed slightly and looked in the mirror. The sign disappeared behind the trees. Maybe I had missed a turnoff that looped back somehow. That seemed unlikely on a straight highway. But strange road designs happen sometimes. I shrugged it off and kept driving. 10 minutes later, I saw the sign again. Mile 42. This time I pulled over. The tires crunched softly on gravel as the car rolled to a stop beside the sign. I stepped out and looked at it. The metal was old and rusted. The reflective paint looked faded, but the number was clear. I checked my GPS. Still 2 hours remaining, which made no sense. I had been driving nearly 90 minutes already. My phone had no signal. I sighed and got back in the car. Maybe the GPS was glitching. Maybe I had somehow driven in a circle. Either way, the road ahead was the only option. So I continued. Another 10 minutes passed. The woods grew thicker, the road darker. Then the headlights revealed something standing near the mile marker ahead. A person. My stomach tightened. A woman stood beside the mile 42 sign. She wore a long gray coat and had dark hair hanging over her face. She was facing the road, watching my car approach. I slowed instinctively. She raised one arm slowly, not waving, just pointing at the sign. Then she lowered her arm again. I drove past her carefully. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even turn her head. In the rearview mirror, she remained standing there beside the sign, watching the road. 5 minutes later, I saw headlights coming toward me. Relief flooded through my chest. Finally, another driver. The approaching car slowed slightly as we passed each other. The driver looked directly at me and mouthed something through the window. 3 words. I couldn't hear him, but I could read his lips. "Turn around now." Before I could react, his car disappeared behind me. I looked in the mirror. The road behind was empty. The headlights were gone, like they had never existed. The next mile marker appeared. Miles Setridus Mid Viens. I frowned. So the road was continuing normally after all. Maybe that strange loop had ended. But a few minutes later, I saw something that made my stomach twist. The woman in the gray coat, standing beside the mile 41 sign, in the exact same pose, watching the road. My breath caught. That wasn't possible. I had passed her miles ago. Yet there she was again. Same clothes, same posture, same expressionless face. As my car passed, she slowly raised her arm again and pointed at the sign. I accelerated. The road curved gently through the forest. Branches scraped lightly against each other in the wind. My headlights cut through the darkness ahead. Then another figure appeared. This time it was a man, standing beside mile 40. He wore a dark jacket and had his hands in his pockets. As I approached, he lifted his head and smiled. Then he raised one hand and pointed at the sign. I drove past without slowing. My pulse was racing now. Something was wrong with this road. Very wrong. The next sign appeared quickly. Mild Tristis Meet Divini. Another person stood beside it. A young boy this time. Barefoot. Pale. He pointed at the number as my car passed. I sped up again. But the mile markers came faster now. And beside each one, a person, men, women, children, all silent, all pointing at the sign as I passed, like they were counting down. The GPS suddenly flickered, then recalculated. Estimated arrival time. Unknown. Distance remaining. Unknown. I gripped the steering wheel harder. What the hell is happening? I muttered. The radio crackled suddenly. A voice came through the static. Not music. A recording. Drivers traveling on Highway 64. The signal broke, then returned. Do not stop near mile marker 42. My chest tightened. Numerous incidents have been reported. Static again. If you pass marker 42, you must not continue driving. The voice cut off. Silence returned to the car. I glanced at the rearview mirror. The forest behind me looked darker now. And something else was there. Headlights. A car was following me. Far back, but gaining slowly. I didn't remember seeing it earlier. Still, the presence of another driver felt reassuring. At least I wasn't alone on this road anymore. Then the next sign appeared. Mile 20. I blinked. That wasn't possible. I had just passed 36. The numbers were skipping now. And the number of people beside the road had grown. Dozens of figures stood in the trees near the sign, all facing the highway, all pointing at the number. As I drove past, every single head turned to follow my car. The headlights behind me grew brighter. The car was closer now. Too close. I could see the outline of the vehicle. A dark sedan. Its high beams flared in my mirror. Then something strange happened. The car behind me sped up suddenly, racing forward. Within seconds, it was right behind my bumper. Then it swerved around me. The driver passed at high speed. As the car pulled ahead, I saw something that made my heart stop. The driver looked exactly like me. Same face, same clothes, same terrified expression. He looked back through the window as he passed and shouted something I couldn't hear. Then his car disappeared around the next bend. I slammed on the brakes. My car skidded to a stop beside the next sign. Mile Vians. My hands were shaking. I stepped out slowly. The forest was silent. Too silent. Then I noticed the people. Hundreds of them. Standing in the trees. Watching me. Their faces pale in the moonlight. Every single one of them slowly raised an arm and pointed behind me. I turned around and saw the sign I had just passed. Mile 0. Beneath it was another sign. Smaller. Old. Almost hidden by rust. It read, "Welcome to Highway 64. I felt cold dread crawl up my spine, because that meant something impossible. If I was at mile 0, then the road ahead had just started. And when I looked down the highway, I saw another sign in the distance, barely visible through the darkness. Mile 47, and beside it, the woman in the gray coat, waiting for me again. Story 3. I wasn't supposed to stop there. That's the first thing I want to make clear. If I had kept driving another 10 minutes, I would have reached the highway junction and probably made it home before 2 a.m. Instead, I stopped at a gas station that didn't appear on any map, bought a cup of coffee I never finished, and spoke to a man who told me something I still don't fully understand. By the time I left that place, the road behind me was gone, and the road ahead wasn't the same one I had been driving. It started as a normal night drive. I had been visiting an old friend 2 towns over, helping him move furniture into his new apartment. The job took longer than expected, and by the time I left, the small town streets were empty and quiet. My GPS estimated an hour and a half to get home. The fastest route was Route 9. I had driven that highway plenty of times before, though usually during the day. At night it felt different. The road stretched endlessly through farmland and low hills, with only occasional houses scattered far from the pavement. My headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the darkness. The radio played softly. Everything felt calm. About 40 minutes into the drive, the gas light flickered on. I frowned. That was strange. I was sure I had more fuel than that. Still, it wasn't a big problem. There were usually a couple of gas stations along Route 9. I kept driving. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The fuel gauge dropped lower, but I hadn't passed a single station. That was when I saw the sign. A flickering neon arrow pointing down a small side road. GAS. Open. The arrow buzzed faintly, the light sputtering in uneven bursts. I slowed the car. The side road was narrow and barely visible, but the thought of running out of gas in the middle of nowhere made the decision easy. I turned. The road curved gently through a cluster of trees. After about half a mile, the gas station appeared. It looked old, very old. 2 pumps stood beneath a faded metal canopy. The building behind them was a small convenience store with yellowed windows and a glowing open sign. There were no other cars. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s, but the lights were on, and the pumps looked functional. I pulled up beside one of them and turned off the engine. The silence outside was immediate and heavy. No traffic, no wind, just the faint electrical buzz of the neon sign. I stepped out and stretched. The air smelled faintly like rain. The pump worked manually. No card reader. Just a metal lever and an old display with spinning numbers. A small handwritten sign said, "Pay inside." I sighed and walked toward the store. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. The interior smelled like stale coffee and dust. Rows of shelves held random items, chips, candy bars, canned food. But most of them looked old, like they'd been sitting there for years. Behind the counter stood a man. He looked to be in his 60s. Thin, gray hair, small round glasses. He watched me quietly as I approached. "Evening," he said. "Evening," I replied. "Need gas?" "Yeah," he nodded slowly. "That pump still works." I glanced toward the window. "You get many customers out here?" "Not anymore." His answer was calm, matter of fact. I set some cash on the counter. "That enough for a full tank?" He didn't look at the money. Instead, he studied my face carefully. Then he asked something unexpected. "Did you see the other road?" I frowned. "What other road?" "The one you passed." "I didn't see anything." Nodded again. "Good." Something about his tone made my stomach tighten. I tried to ignore it. "You've been running this place long?" "Long enough." He finally took the money and opened the register. The drawer slid out with a metallic clack. But instead of giving me change, he said something that made me pause. "You shouldn't stay here long." I blinked. "Why?" He looked toward the front windows. The darkness outside pressed against the glass. "They'll notice." A cold ripple moved through my chest. "Who will?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he grabbed a paper cup and poured coffee from an old metal pot. Then he slid the cup toward me. "Drink this before you leave." I stared at it. The liquid inside looked black and thick. "I didn't ask for coffee." "You'll want it." His voice was calm, but firm. I hesitated, then took the cup. The coffee tasted bitter, stronger than anything I'd had before. I swallowed anyway. While I drank, the man spoke again. You've been driving a long road tonight. Just Route 9. No. He shook his head slowly. That's not what you're on anymore. I laughed nervously. What do you mean? You turned when you saw the gas sign. So? So that road doesn't go back where you came from. The coffee suddenly felt heavier in my stomach. That's not funny. I'm not joking. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I set the empty cup down. Look, I said, I appreciate the gas, but I should get going. He nodded. Yes. Then he added quietly, just remember one thing. What? When you leave here, don't stop driving. The words sounded strangely serious. I forced a smile. Okay. And don't pick anyone up. I frowned. Why would I? You'll see them. My skin prickled. They'll be standing along the road. His eyes locked onto mine. They'll ask for help. Don't stop. The bell above the door jingled again as I stepped outside. The night air felt colder now. I filled the tank quickly and got back into the car. The engine started with a low rumble. For a moment, I considered turning around, but the road behind me looked darker than before, almost swallowed by the trees. So I drove forward instead. The road twisted through the forest. The headlights stretched across the asphalt. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The gas station lights faded behind me. Eventually, the road straightened. And that's when I saw the first person. A woman standing beside the road. She wore a long coat and held one arm raised, like she was hitchhiking. I slowed instinctively. Then I remembered the man's words. Don't stop. I pressed the accelerator. As my car passed, she turned her head slowly and smiled, but her eyes were completely black. I drove faster. The road continued into darkness. Another figure appeared. A man this time, standing in the middle of the road. I swerved around him. He didn't move, didn't react. Just stood there, watching. More figures appeared as the miles passed. Some standing, some sitting, some waving for help. Every single one stared at my car as I passed, and every one of them had those same black eyes. Eventually, I stopped checking the mirrors. Eventually, I stopped counting them. Then something worse happened. The road signs began repeating. Route 9, Route 9, Route 9, over and over. Like the road was looping endlessly. My chest tightened. Then I noticed something in the distance. Lights. A gas station. Relief flooded through me. Finally, I pulled closer. The canopy. The pumps. The glowing open sign. It was the same gas station. I pulled into the lot slowly. The same old man stood behind the counter inside, watching me through the window. When I walked in, the bell jingled again. He sighed. You stopped driving, didn't you? I shook my head. No. Then how did you come back here? I didn't have an answer. My voice came out shaky. What is this place? He looked tired suddenly. Route 9 isn't a highway anymore. Then what is it? He glanced toward the road outside. An exit. From where? But he didn't answer. Instead, he looked at my empty coffee cup, then back at me. You're going to have to keep driving again. My stomach twisted. For how long? His eyes softened slightly. That depends. On what? He paused, then said quietly, on whether they recognize you yet. I turned slowly toward the window. Dozens of dark figures now stood beyond the gas pumps, watching the building, waiting. The old man spoke one final sentence. You'd better finish your coffee this time, because the road outside was filling up with